Thank you to the moderator and the Office of the Town Manager for providing this forum to address town meeting members. I look forward to seeing town meeting members in person next week. This video is being recorded on October 17th, 2021. By a vote of 5-4, the Finance Committee recommends against adoption of Article 7, appropriate for Emery Grover building design in the amount of $1,475,000 as written. Instead, by a vote of 7-2, the Finance Committee recommends adoption of an amendment to Article 7 to appropriate $350,000 for engineering and design at the temporary use of the Hillside School by School Department Administration and Operations that are currently housed at the Emery Grover building. I will first explain the funding of the proposed project under the main motion of Article 7 and how it fits into the town's long-standing debt limits. This forms the basis of the Finance Committee's concerns with Article 7 as written. Lastly, I will explain the reasons for recommending adoption of an amendment to Article 7. The design appropriation under the main motion of Article 7 is proposed to be funded through general fund debt within the levy limit. These design funds would be used to generate detailed plans and to refine the estimated construction costs for the Emery Grover building, for the temporary swing space at the Hillside School, and for off-site parking at the Stephen Palmer building to supplement parking at the Emery Grover building. The total construction cost of these three components is currently estimated at $20,875,000. Based upon the town's 5-year capital improvement plan, any future construction costs for these three components are also anticipated to be funded through debt, whether by general fund debt within the levy or Community Preservation Act funded debt, or a combination of the two. As a reminder, the town maintains two debt service policies to ensure that debt obligations are not overly burdensome on the town or on taxpayers. The first policy is that total debt service, which includes general fund debt within the levy, Community Preservation Act debt, and excluded debt from overrides, be no more than 10% of gross revenues. The second policy is that general fund debt alone be no more than 3% of general fund revenues. Since May 2021, the town has been undergoing efforts to devise a facility financing plan that maintains its projected debt financing within the established 3% and 10% limits. Initial debt projection scenarios to fund an earlier proposal for the Emery Grover building, along with other identified projects such as Mitchell, Pollard, and the DPW complex, exceeded both of these limits over several years. In particular, the 10% total debt service limit was projected to be exceeded for up to 11 years, with the total debt service in a single year reaching a maximum of 15.1% of gross revenues. This is greater than 10% limit by more than half. Due to the high cost and excess debt burden of these projects, the facility financing efforts are ongoing and are expected to continue through January 2022. These efforts are focused on either lowering project costs or on spreading costs out over a greater period of time so as to reduce the number of years during which the established debt limits are exceeded. The Finance Committee appreciates the efforts to date in reducing the project costs of the Emery Grover building, but notes that the reduced scope has not yet been considered within the context of other identified projects, such as Mitchell, Pollard, and the DPW complex. The Finance Committee is concerned that appropriating design funds for the Emery Grover building ahead of having a complete facility financing plan in place may either limit the amount of debt available to fund other needed building projects, or may make it more difficult to adhere to the town's two debt service policies. From a planning and budgeting standpoint, the Finance Committee believes that it is not prudent to appropriate design funds for the Emery Grover renovation and addition ahead of having a complete facility financing plan in place. We anticipate that a facility financing plan will be complete in advance of the May 2022 annual town meeting. Nevertheless, the Finance Committee shares the widespread consensus that the existing Emery Grover building is not a suitable workspace for staff and is not an accessible space for the public. Due to factors such as its lack of ADA compliance, its aging heating, electrical, and plumbing infrastructure, its lack of fire sprinklers, and its poor ventilation in interior offices. For these reasons, the Finance Committee recommends adoption of an amendment to Article 7 that would preserve the timeline for moving out of the existing Emery Grover building and would proceed with design funding for modifications to the Hillside School for temporary use by School Department Administration and Operations that are currently housed at the Emery Grover building. The $350,000 sum allocated for this purpose is comprised of $213,250 for design costs of the temporary facilities at Hillside, $18,750 for costs associated with surveys, inspections, site plans, and printing of materials, $25,000 for project management fees, $5,000 for bonding allowance, and $88,000 for contingency. The total estimated construction costs to modify the Hillside School is $3 million. The Finance Committee recommends adoption of an amendment to Article 7.